Looks like it's 2 p.m. So I will call us to order. This is the City of Tumwater General Government Committee meeting. It is 2 p.m. on Wednesday, January 11th, and let's go ahead and get started. Our first order is roll call. I am here as well as Councilmember Dahlhoff and Councilmember Kathy with a full contingent of council members here. Beyond that, our first order of actionable business is to just discuss our meeting time moving forward. Brad, you're listed under this item, but I think this one's relatively simple. So we've been meeting at 2 p.m. for, I don't know, before I was even on this committee. It's been meeting at 2 p.m. for a long time. Actually, but oh, you want it to be 6 o'clock?
No, I apologize, Michael. We had originally been at was at 3 o'clock, and I think we shifted to 2 o'clock maybe a couple of years ago, very recently. So
that's right. So I kind of I added this to the agenda so we could talk about maybe choosing a more convenient time. The mailman did just come in, hearing my dog in the background. I apologize for that. But 2 p.m. is kind of a challenge for me personally, being in the middle of the day with work. It's hard to get away to make meetings. For me personally, it would be a lot more convenient if maybe we could align this with the other committees like Public Health and Safety and Public Works that meet at 8 a.m. But I wanted us to be able to have a discussion of that, and that is something that will require a motion if we do want to change the time. So with that, do either of you have thoughts? Is that something you'd be receptive to, or do you have any other thoughts about that?
Joan, would you like to go first?
No.
The only question I have is 8 o'clock is fine, because with my schedule as well, 2 o'clock is like my sweet spot for all my meetings. So would it be the same day though, the same week? That's my question.
I think it could. We could do Wednesdays at 8, or we could do a Tuesday. It's just that sometimes, public health, I don't know which day Public Health and Safety usually.
It's always the day before general government. So it was yesterday.
So we could do Tuesdays on the week that does not fall for public safety. Assuming though, Joan, we should hear from Joan before we start looking at calendars though.
Well, Michael called and talked to me about this, and my first reaction was no, I hate this idea. The last thing in the world I want to do as a council member is have 8 a.m. meetings. He offered to show up with Red Bull and coffee at my house before this happened. And I told him really that wouldn't be necessary, but I'm going to take a rain check on that when there is a time that I need that. And so, I'm part of a team here, and I want to be a team player. And so since it's the preference of the two of you, I'm going to start doing whatever I have to do mentally or emotionally or maybe physically, I don't know, and get up at some ungodly hour. And I told him I was glad it was just once a month. So I'm going to tell the two of you that I want to honor what is best for you.
Joan, you're a rock star. Michael will do the beverages. I will do any pastry or any protein you would like and have it delivered to your house.
See, that would mean I have to even earlier to accept it and say thank you and maybe fix it and add my cream and stuff like that.
We can work on that.
I'll be fine
Yeah.
for a while. I'll keep you posted.
The only challenge, Michael, I have is if you're doing it Tuesdays, those are really long days. If we're doing 8 and then we have council at 7 or a work session, like that's too long. So I prefer not to have, because I do that for public health and
Sure.
safety, and it's just too long.
Why are we
Not just even for me, it's for staff.
why are we talking about changing it? What's the problem with Wednesday?
That there isn't. We just usually, well, I'm not aware of a problem with Wednesday. It's just I was just proposing Tuesday. We could do it Thursday, except Public Works meets once every other week. So it would be a little more difficult to schedule on Thursdays because of Public Works.
As also
So-
to be aware, on Tuesday mornings, you also alternate, with the other subcommittee, depending upon the members. So you're going to have a conflict probably both Tuesday and Thursday.
Okay.
I think it's either Monday or Wednesday, and I prefer Wednesday.
Okay.
The only thing is that I can't go more than 2 hours because on Wednesday I have a 10 o'clock meeting, but I don't think that's a problem, so.
Okay. So we currently,
We didn't ask Brad.
Brad, how do you feel about 8 a.m.? Is that agreeable?
It's fine with me. The only concern I had was Tuesday mornings. We have our department meeting every week.
Okay.
But that's the only conflict I would have. I can work around everything else.
So is it keep it on Wednesday okay for you, Brad?
Yes.
So maybe we keep it on the same days, but just do it on Wednesday, but at 8 a.m., but on the same days that it currently is scheduled for.
So the second week of the month.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Can we just do this by ourselves, or does this?
We have to, there has to be a motion that we have to approve here in this committee. We don't have to take it to the full council, but we just have to do a motion here that someone needs to move that we host our meetings on the second Wednesday, 8 a.m. of every month.
I think you just made it since it was your
Yes.
idea.
So moved.
Okay, well, so Leetta has made a motion. Is there a second?
I don't know. I don't really want to be caught voting for this.
All right,
Yes,
well, I'm a member. I can second it.
I'll second it.
Okay, second. So motion by Councilmember Dahlhoff and seconded by Councilmember Kathy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those
Thank you, Joan.
opposed?
Joe's
Motion
also opposed.
passes
I've already been-
unanimously.
Post thing and let it go.
All
So
right, well,
This
thank
would
you
be
for,
effective for February then?
yes,
Okay, I'm letting Melody know.
okay, wonderful. So our next item on the agenda is ordinance number 2022-014 rental housing registration.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Can everyone see? Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Welcome to the new year. We have a new ordinance. This is the rental housing registration ordinance, as Councilmember Althauser mentioned. It is in support of some actions that were identified in the original resolution in 2018. That city staff is reviewing measures to help renters access housing and stay housed. The council, just sort of a reminder everyone, the council adopted the Housing Action Plan in 2021, which included an action item to establish a rental housing registration program. And then last year, city staff integrated both the resolution and the Housing Action Plan into one set of actions going forward for everything related to affordable housing and tenant protections. In early 2022, the General Government Committee reviewed those actions, and then the council prioritized 3 actions from that list regarding tenant protections in March of last year, which included an ordinance to address rental housing registration. There were also, in addition to those 2 other priority items, we have the 2 ordinances that the council approved last December that made some changes to TMC 570 and added a new chapter for tenant protections at 575. Just a quick update on that. The ordinance 5 that added 575 tenant protections will become effective April 8 of this year to give us enough time to get everything set up that we need to, but also to start the clocks in terms of when the landlords can request things and so forth. As an update of where we are in the progress for that, we have been meeting with our communication staff to outreach to all property owner landowners in the city of the new requirements. We're putting together the rental information packets. We're putting together the webpage, and we're intending to have all that ready by early March as an initial rollout. So all those things are underway as we speak. The second item that we'll talk about after this particular ordinance is a scope for a contract with the Dispute Resolution Center. This is the last of the three items that we'll be addressing here today. So in putting together the rental housing registration ordinance, number one, the reason why we wanted to do a rental registration ordinance was to make sure that we have a current and active list of those property owners who are renting property in the city. We're doing this primarily for informational purposes. We want to make sure that we have an appropriate list. So when we update our tenant protection things, we have a way of contacting the property owners and in turn the tenants in the city with these changes. We reviewed what other jurisdictions in Western Washington are doing. We looked at Aberdeen, Auburn, Lacey, Tacoma, and Tukwila. I think the two primary examples we looked at for this case was Auburn and Tacoma, because I think they had the most developed programs of this type. Aberdeen also has some interesting things that we can talk about. These are just the reasons why we're doing this. This is the Housing Action, establishing a rental registration program to improve access to data and share information with landlords. And the same measure 18 from the resolution in 2018. The amendments would establish a new chapter in Title V, Business Taxes, Licenses, and Regulations. We will be starting with rental properties with 5 or more units as a way of making sure we can get the program up and running. It is a lot easier to identify properties in the city that are rentals of this sort than it is to go down to the level of determining single family houses that are rentals. So we're starting small and are proposing to work up from there. The primary change here would be to require a business license for these property owners to operate. And that would be a mechanism for communication with tenants and landlords about any rental regulations and or information education that the city may have. Currently, our business license applications are $50 annually, and renewals are $20 for every business located in the city, except for nonprofits. And then long-term rentals are business and occupation tax exempt. So we wouldn't be creating an additional cost for the property owners through this process.
Could I ask a question, Brad?
Sure.
On the first one there, if you could go back where we were. No, I'm sorry. What, there.
Right here.
Yes. For rental properties with 5 or more units, are these contiguous units or someone can, so it's not like someone owns 5 different properties?
No, this would be on a single property, 5 different units. Now, those 5 different units could be, say, separate buildings, but they most likely will be in one building, 5 individual units.
So 5 on one location, one lot, like little cabins or something like that?
Or just a small building that has 5 individual units in it.
I see. Okay. And so, okay, because we have landowners or landlords and in this town that own multiple rentals.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not considered a rental business?
Well, for our purposes, we're starting our tracking by the individual properties rather than the individual landlords, because starting from the other direction, I think will be a little more difficult, because in some cases, say the same landlord may have multiple companies running different businesses, and we just don't have the capacity to figure all that out. So we're going to start from the other direction.
Okay, so it's 5 in one location. Okay. Thank you.
And there are currently about 76 of those developments in the city based on our records. We're confirming that right now as part of our education process. and determining how we're going to be contacting folks. As also a little more information on how we're going to be doing our outreach to landlords in the city this spring. We're preparing a mailer that will go to all identified rentals in the property in the city. And that's everything, including those that are under 5 units. So it could be a duplex, a triplex, single family, if we can identify those kinds of things. We'll also be doing a social media outreach to those areas. So we're going to make sure that the information on all these things will be going to a little bit wider audience here. But for the long term, we're also going to be using this rental registration. We're going to try to build it from that. As I mentioned, this program could be expanded in the future to require all rental properties be licensed. And it could also be potentially the basis for future rental regular inspections of rental units. And this is where the city of Aberdeen's program comes in, because they instituted their rental registration program primarily as a means to inspect rental units in the city and to ensure that the livability and all that was present. I believe they do inspections every 3 years out there in their program. We're not quite ready for that. We would need to first determine what the additional costs of that program would be, because that would require additional staff to be available for the inspections and also tracking and pursuing an inspection program. So we're starting small and going to be building from there. The next steps in the process is we're asking that the city council schedule this for discussion with work session if they're ready on January 24. And then if after a work session council is ready, we would propose that we go to consideration of the first meeting in February. Were there any questions on the information that I just shared?
Are there questions? Do you have any other questions, Councilmember Kathy? No? Okay. The one thing I would say is, you know, we got some questions about when we were passing the tenant protection stuff. You know, one of the common questions that came up was like, how are we going to make landlords aware of these changes so that they can abide by them? And I think that this is a really important answer to that question of like, just because we change the law and the ordinance doesn't mean that people are instantly aware that we do it. And I think this is a really important strategy in making sure that everyone, landlords, tenants, everybody is playing from the same deck of cards. Everyone has the same information moving forward. So I think it's pretty important from that perspective specifically. So there's no action needed today unless we wanted to recommend approve, like endorse essentially the ordinance as it heads to council like we regularly do. But it sounds like, are folks comfortable moving this to a work session? And if so, is there a motion that the committee recommend the ordinance?
Sure, so moved.
So moved. Is that a second, Councilmember Kathy? You were muted.
Yes, it is.
Great. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Thank you. Let me scroll back up to the top of my agenda for the next item. Item 5, the Dispute Resolution Center, the Landlord Dispute Resolution Services.
So as I mentioned, that this is the third of the 3 items that the council asked that we bring forward back in March of last year. I'm going to share a screen of a portion of the staff report that was prepared for this item. I hadn't prepared a PowerPoint, so we can talk from this. Essentially, one of the other important components to all of the the efforts that the city has made in terms of strengthening the regulatory side of tenant protections and the information side in terms of starting a rental registration program is what can we do to make it easier to resolve conflicts. And we, as part of that process, it was identified fairly early on by the council that using the Dispute Resolution Center of Thurston County to support those efforts is probably a very good way to do that. It keeps things out of the courts. It keeps a level playing ground, more level playing ground, but for tenants and landlords to work out differences and to do so in a way that doesn't result in long-term effects of people's records and so forth. So we are, the proposal that is before you is a scope, and we haven't actually prepared the contract, but essentially what I wanted to do is sort of walk through what we are proposing to include in the contract. If the General Government Committee is okay with that, we would go ahead and draft a contract, work out the language again with the Dispute Resolution Center, and then come back to the council for approval for that contract. And this would be for mediation services, and it would be for services that would be exclusively for residents of Tumwater to access. If you recall, I apologize, I don't remember the exact meeting date. I think it was probably the first meeting in December. The council or the work session in December, you had a discussion about what to do with the ARPA funds that the city had. And we're looking at various options of things to do. And one recommendation was to take a portion of that $50,000 and apply it towards this program, meaning that the city would contribute money to the Dispute Resolution Center that would be used to provide services for Tumwater residents to offset the costs of providing services to Tumwater residents. We would need to, again, as I mentioned, draft a contract for final approval by the council. And then we would also have to work through with the council how this would work after this year or after the initial year of the contract in terms of funding, how it's working, and if we wanted to make any tweaks going forward. I have mentioned already the intent and considerations and establishing an initial scope of services. The scope of services for the Dispute Resolution Center would cover intake and mediation for housing-related cases that don't qualify for the early resolution pilot program or come after that end. And then I've included some notes that I got from Jody at the Dispute Resolution Center that she also updated this month to provide some additional information on how that would work. So if you have any questions about what she's included that I've included in the staff report, let me know. The cost of those services, again, would be based on the sliding scale. We would determine whether the sliding scale would be used for city as to pay offset costs. We would try to figure out how that would work. So essentially we're not, it would benefit the city residents in addition to whatever, benefits they would have. Councilmember Dahlhoff, your question.
I was gonna wait till you're done. Well, I just wanted to play through a scenario that with one of our community members that had emailed you, Brad, that you had given my info and Michael's info, right? With a manufactured home park, 55 plus, rent going up, and the dispute about that rent, right? So it's not about the notice or how long they were or the value, because it's even below our threshold of the requirements at $33, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then complaining about things not getting fixed in the park or their property. How would DRC play into that, or would it?
Yeah, that's actually a good question, because ultimately the Dispute Resolution Center would have to have both willing parties participate in the process. So on one hand, you could have the tenants of either a mobile home park or something else want to, have a discussion or a mediation with the current owner or landlord to deal with a particular issue. If the property owner or landlord is willing to participate in the process, then they could use these services. I don't think we have a means to compel one party to participate in this if they're not willing to do so. Michael, I guess for further clarification, I would ask if Councilmember Althauser has additional information.
No, I think that's right, is that would have to be like voluntary. And then I don't think that's I don't think that's necessarily outside of the scope of what's envisioned by this at all. Though it's not the first hypothetical that would come to mind. The first thing that would come to mind would be like, well, this person hasn't paid the rent, and then you utilize this program in lieu of the knee-jerk reaction being filing eviction proceedings, which is bad for the tenant because it goes on a permanent record. It's bad for the landlord because they have to spend time in court. Like, it's better for everybody to resolve it amicably. So I don't see any reason why that this contract couldn't include a situation like that, but it would need to be like if the landlord is for, you know, I'm not asserting that this landlord would not participate in a program like that, but they just need to be willing partners to do it.
I'm just wondering if we could have that, I mean, at least not like as Jody noted, father up, as upstream as possible, right? Because if we have seniors who cannot pay that rent and then don't pay, and then we get to the step that Michael talked about, how can we prevent that? And I'm wondering how we can market that or share that service with specifically the demographic that's having struggle, right? Well, I'm talking about seniors primarily, but it's anyone, right, who's struggling to pay the rent. If we could do it as upstream as possible. Because I'm hearing more and more when I went and visited our community member, 5 of her neighbors came out and wanted to talk, right? So it's not an isolated incident. I just don't want to miss out on those touch points and those examples.
Yeah. We're probably going to, as costs and things increase and rents increase, we'll be hearing more and more of that, right?
Right.
Part of that, you know, there's lots of reasons why rent is increasing. Some of that is within our control. Some of that is outside of our control. You know, it's a question that I'm not sure just has one answer, but this could be a tool for that. So long as the landlord wants to participate in it. I don't know how we would compel them to do that if they don't want to.
I do think we could write the scope for this to be wide enough to include those options where both parties want to have another, you know, voice and help them resolve differences that may be beyond just the immediate late paying renters, other things like that.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment or ask a question. Are the complaints, Leah, about the rent that they pay monthly to rent their space? Is this a place where they have to also pay yearly to have the space and then they pay monthly to rent it?
I don't know about the yearly charge, but the monthly rate is going up.
The monthly rate.
Correct.
Because, you know, we went through some of this type of thing before when we through mobile home parks and the things we have on our books about that. And that was also about the person wanting to sell it and their owning of the property that their place sits on and so forth. Okay, so it's their monthly
Right.
rent.
Right. And I think what I'm seeing in this one area is seniors scared that they're getting pushed out, like their rent's going up, so they get pushed out and they get someone else in there, right? And then seniors feel like, well, then I'm not going to do this, right? Then the landlord says, well, I'm not going to fix your shed, right? So it gets like a little retaliatory. And I'm just going, and I went out and was like, hey, can we just take a breather? Like, power of the pause. Let's hear each other out. And so I'm thinking if we could then say, hey, here's an unbiased resource for you that maybe we could like temper down the emotions, because it is super passionate and it is emotional. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like we could have the scope be broad enough to include something like that.
Okay.
I think it'd be good. Yeah. Are these large mobile homes?
Do you mean is
I think-
the park large or are the units large?
Both.
I mean, I guess, no, they're single wides. I mean, there are some double, but there's mostly single wide.
Okay.
It is one of our poorest, the lowest income manufactured home parks in our community, though.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, Leah, thanks for the reminder on that. Because the manufactured homes, it's a fairly substantial portion, number one of our housing stock, over 1,000 units, plus our affordable housing cost. It makes a lot of sense to make sure we cover that. There are a couple of questions that we'll need to address. I think Councilmember Althauser, I may need to talk with you further about when that 10-day notice for eviction officially goes on the record. I think we identify that as a question we need to answer that we're still trying to work out the answer for. As I mentioned, the cost would be for 2023 would be the $50,000 coming out of ARPA to pay in full a subsidized cost to a particular amount. We would determine, we have been discussions already with the Dispute Resolution Center about the pricing for that, but it would probably be based on a number of sessions ultimately. Sliding scale, cost, staffing. There may need to be a little bit of city staffing beyond sending funds to the Dispute Resolution Center to sort of track this to make sure it's doing what we need it to do. If we think it's successful, if we think there needs to be a little more time spent on the city side, we will determine that, I think, at the end of this contract and then go from there. So we did have some discussions about other sources of funding to do this or what we could do. Given the changing nature and the state legislature, and Michael, you can speak exactly to what the legislature will be coming out with this year. As you know already, exactly what funds they'll approve and what programs they'll approve. I can't speak to what pots of money we may be able to draw from in the future, but I have a strong suspicion there'll be some out there for us to take advantage of. Timeline, as I mentioned, if we get your blessing on the general scope, we'll go ahead and prepare that and get this scheduled with the council for probably this first quarter. And then I've included some of how their sliding scale works as of July of last year. And in this notice, so if you have any additional questions or anything, let me know as we're going ahead with this. I guess from the staff perspective, if we can get your blessing to go ahead and prepare a contract, that's the action we're looking for today.
So do we need a motion for that, or is that a thumbs up? Because it'll then be returning to council for approval.
I think a thumbs up is appropriate.
Okay. Yes, so long as we can, when it comes to council, the scope can envision kind of the goals that Lieta discussed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sounds great. Joan or Lieta, do you have questions or thoughts on if this is ready for contract approval at the council level?
I like that we're moving forward, right? Because in the interim, we still have all these challenges. So I would like to continue to move forward, right? Knowing that we can continually adapt, modify, zhuzh is my word for this month. So yeah, I don't want to wait any longer.
You mean zhush, or however you pronounce that, at the council level or after it goes there, or where are we doing?
I mean, like when Brad and other staff look back to see how it's going, any modifications, whatever, however they phase that in, right? But that our community can start using this now.
Yes, 6 months from now, if we need to tweak the terms, maybe we tweak the terms or something.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine with me to move it on to council. I think that there's going to be some questions. I think Brad's going to have to do a little explaining. And they may turn to one of the two of you since you've had experience face to face here with this whole thing. But yeah, I think it's time to move it and time to let council hear about it.
Okay. Sounds good. Is that adequate direction, Brad?
Yes, it is.
Great. Well, our last action item on the agenda is the 2023 Long Range Planning Work Program.
Yes, just as a brief introduction, the Planning Commission and the City Council held a work session in December to discuss our long-range work program. The council has to approve our work program on an annual basis. We typically do that in January. And there was a request that we bring this to the General Government Committee after that work session for further discussion of any issues that may have come out regarding the work program, what we're doing, time we're spending, that kind of thing. So I have not prepared anything aside from providing you with our proposed work program and the cover staff report explaining the breakdown there. So I guess I'm looking for questions and that you may have. And our ultimate recommendation on the staff side would be that while we had noted that we would like this to go to council consideration on your meeting on the 17th, after further discussion, we would like to know if we could put this on the consent calendar if the General Government Committee is fine with the way the work program is set up and doesn't think the council needs to have further discussion on the meeting on the 17th.
Well, that part
If
makes me.
anyone has questions, feel free.
What-
Sorry to interrupt, Joan.
That's okay. What Brad just said makes me nervous because most every year there is something that some council members want to have on the work plan, or they look at it and go, just like right now, I have a question under the, golly, which thing is it under? But is anything under the work plan, if it's listed first, it's more important than what's listed third?
No, and if you'd like, I can share screen and show you the work program again to remind you of what's there. So why don't I go ahead and do that?
Okay.
Really, it's everything that's above the line, right? Everything that's below the line, that's what we argue about, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
so-
but some people are, I know, I've done it in the past, and I have some things here, you're looking for something and then you look and see, oh, good, they're gonna spend, so I think some people have done a little combing through this.
Yeah, so let me briefly explain again, sort of the structure of the work program and what we're doing here. Number one, this is based on our ability to be fully staffed to do the work. And I'm crossing my fingers, and I'll do so on the camera, that the candidates that we are identified and interviewed last week are willing to work for us for whatever money we can scrounge up and other benefits. So I'm really hoping we'll have somebody else join me to help with this work shortly. If that occurs, then I think all those staff hours, all these projects that were listed are fair game in the sense that this is something we think we can accomplish in 2023 as part of our work program. So breaking down again, and again, thank you, Councilmember Kathy, about the question about the ranking. There isn't a ranking in this system. This is merely for us to sort of keep
Okay.
track of the various items. It's not a priority list. The first group of things is everything related to the comprehensive plan. So that comprehensive plan amendment docket includes two big items. We're going to be starting work on the periodic update next year. That's going to be a very big component of what we're going to be putting time towards. That's why we have 780 hours identified for that. The process really is going to be, we're going to be developing our community engagement program. We're going to be starting meetings with the various community groups and going to outreach and everything else, just to sort of start that whole process. That process will be going for another through 2025. The second component, and this is a smaller component than in previous years, is our annual amendment cycle. As you recall, the council agreed to postpone accepting new private applications until the update process was done. However, we do have a couple of things that we need to take care of from the city side. Every other year, we adopt a new capital facilities plan. And then we also have adoption of the old Highway 99 plan that will become part of the comprehensive plan. So those two things will occur also. It won't be as big of a process as we've had in previous years, but that will be our comprehensive plan amendment cycle. In addition to that, we have some very specific things identified for amendments for development regulations. That's everything in the Tumwater Municipal Code. And it falls into three buckets. The first one is things that are relating to housing. And that one item that's identified for housing rental registration, completing that process this year is one of those items. We also have, and these are pretty big items, the urban forestry management plan amendments that we are currently working on. We have the tree preservation regulation update that we just completed this week, our third community conversation with our stakeholders out in the community. We had a joint briefing last night with the Planning Commission and the tree board that went very well. The next step in our process is developing actual content for the regulations and the ordinance approval process. So that is underway and moving forward. We've also had an online survey that's been completed. We did a citywide notification of what we're doing at the end of last year through postcards and social media. So I think we're pretty well underway with that process. Shortly behind that is our street tree standards update, which is both a regulatory update and our street tree plan that we're preparing. This is important because essentially it's a document that will, number one, hopefully result in better outcomes when we are planting street trees, meaning that when we did our survey in 2018 of all city street trees in public area, with 60% of those were causing issues with sidewalks and streets. We definitely don't want to do that in the future. It costs money, headaches, and everything else. So the intent of this process is to try to start the rectification of that. And also, it will be a way of supporting the city staff and other entities and say maintaining street trees, as well as supporting individual property owners and maintaining street trees. We are just starting, we just had our initial briefing with the Planning Commission and the Tree Board last night on this process. The consultant has finished a gap analysis of what things that are we've identified that we need to take a closer look at. And we're going to be starting our stakeholder process next month with both external stakeholders, community members, as well as internal staff. And then finally, the landscaping and buffering requirements. This is everything that happens when we have a development project for on-site landscaping. That could be parking lot landscaping, landscaping used for buffers, all of that kind of stuff. All three of these are interrelated. And that's why we're sort of doing all these at about the same time, but staggered a little bit because we don't have the capacity to do everything all at once. But we do have a draft of the gap analysis for the landscaping, and we are now working out, we're getting ready to issue the public engagement plan for that process as well. All three of these proposed amendments are intended to be completed this year. And they're going to be outside of the comprehensive plan process. These are probably the next big item that staff will be working with Planning Commission, Tree Board, and the City Council on. The last set of amendments are general amendments. We have an item for housekeeping amendments. We have a start for our development regulation periodic update. This is tied back into the larger comprehensive plan update process. We're fortunate we've been keeping up with required state amendments, but there will be some things that we do need to update as part of that process. We'll be just starting work on that. Also, we are hoping that we'll be able to work with the county on updating our urban growth area zoning regulations that have not been touched in probably 25 years. We have the updated plan that was approved in 2021, but we need the regulations to make sure that the policies are enforced on the ground. So that's the second big bucket. They're about equal in size with the comprehensive plan amendment process. The third bucket is all of our other planning projects. And last year, for example, we had the annexations. This year, we'll be dealing with the equity toolbox. The habitat conservation plan, we are trying to get a draft out to the public this year and start the environmental review process. We have an update for the hazard mitigation plan through Thurston County that we do every 6 years. This is a FEMA document that's very, very handy. It informs our zoning and as well as emergency services, things that we need to be doing that way. In addition to that, we also have some other housing related things and public inquiry. So it's sort of a catch-all for other projects. The Habitat Conservation Plan will be a substantial component of that. It'll involve my time, Austin's time, and Mike's time to really hopefully get us to the point that we're closer to getting something to adopt in the near future.
Brad, can I ask, is it the Habitat Conservation Plan that we're waiting on and that Fish and Wildlife is involved in?
That's correct. We're working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They are the agency that will have to issue the permit for this, approving the plan and going forward with that. We're also working very closely with WFW because they have a lot of the expertise when it comes to the species that are in the city. And then Also, as part of that, we will be restarting the stakeholder process that we put on hold with COVID and a few other things. But it's time for us to go back out and talk to the larger community about what we're doing and how it's going to be done. So
And how it
hopefully
is.
it's a lot more visible this year than it has been in the past few years.
So could you just briefly in a few words say what is the difference between and what you're doing and how it works between the habitat conservation plan and the hazard mitigation plan with Thurston County?
Yeah, they're two separate distinct things. So the habitat conservation plan is a way for us to address the listed and or threatened species, federally threatened species in the city, the Mazama pocket gopher, the Oregon spotted frog, and the two bird species. So it's a very specific plan about, number one, if development occurs in the city, how will we mitigate for that, and how will we mitigate in a way that it's a coordinated mitigation effort rather than individual habitat conservation plans issued for individual projects. If we didn't do it, that would be the alternative. The hazard mitigation plan is a document that FEMA has sort of started throughout the country. And what it is, it covers all of the potential natural disasters, essentially, that could occur in the city or in the county at large. So think about flooding, earthquakes, lahar, wind events. We're going to be talking a little bit about fires. So there's those, and what that does, and what we're doing with that plan is identifying, first of all, what are the hazards, and number two is what are we doing to avoid creating situations where we make things worse. For example, building in a floodplain when we expect to have flooding, or building on soils that are not good if you're going to have an earthquake, that kind of thing. So really, it's sort of setting us up to say, it also really helps inform our zoning to say, okay, this is why we're not developing this area, because if we do so, we're going to put people at harm, we're going to put property at harm, and we don't want to do that. So this is how we're intending to address that.
So the habit conservation plan, would it be the one that is looking at or taking into consideration or those types of things of the climate, the climate mitigation go within that, or is that a totally separate thing? The thing that aims on.
For both of those plans, we are taking climate mitigation into account. Number one, because for the habitat conservation plan, it's a 30-year plan. It's going to be in place for 30 years, but we need to have mechanisms in there to help us make adjustments as things change, as we've been seeing. They've been changing on the climate side, hotter, drier summers, wetter falls, all those kinds of things, and how they could potentially impact the species in terms of what we can control, and it was within our ability to do so. That definitely plays into the hazard mitigation plan, because if we are thinking we're going to have increased rain events during the winter, increased flooding risk during the winter, and or fire threat during the summer that we haven't been having until recently, we will be addressing that through the hazard mitigation plan.
Yeah, I just read an article about species, endangered species, and the impact that climate is having on that. So the ones that are endangered now, there may be some quickly added in some areas. I'm not saying necessarily here, but I think it's something we need to pay attention to. We're focused on the ones that we've known for quite a while.
Right.
There could change with the climate change. So
the important thing is, if there are things we're identifying to mitigate and for the species that are currently protected, and our mitigation strategies that we think will work now will be changed by what may be happening for climate change in the future. We need to be building into ways to adapt to that and change that over the course of the HCP. So that's where our focus is for that.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
The fourth and final big component of our plan is our general mitigation and coordination. That's can be our ongoing coordination with other city departments. That includes things like our code enforcement team, working with the green team, working with stormwater, working with the traffic team, those kinds of things. We also have general coordination with other jurisdictions. We've got our quarterly meetings with the port. We've got our coordination with intercity transit and the school districts. We also have, under this item, and the biggest item is our regional housing council. The time that we're going to be spending and that we've said that we will be allocating to the regional housing council through the interlocal agreement. And then finally, we have a small item here for department management. So taking all four of those things together, determining how much we have available for employees and their time, we've determined we can spend this amount of time and accomplish these items on this list as part of the 2023 work program. The below the line projects are everything else that we currently don't have the time or capacity to work on, but have been identified as things that we should consider working on in the future. The discussion that we have every year is what items should be, brought up from below the line, what should go down and all that. I have not received any questions or comments from the council or the planning commission following the meeting in December on particular items that people would like to see added, subtracted, and so forth. So if there's anything on this list that you feel that we should move up, we would also have to identify some items on the list above to bring down. So that's where we stand with all these items.
I just had a question about the code enforcement amendments. How does that impact any of the work being done now in code enforcement by our staff, our officer, or whatever?
No, I don't think so. And we've had that item on for the 2 years. One of the things that when we did the changeover and redid how we did code enforcement in 2016 and 17 was to start to think about what additional supports we would need either on the regulatory side or our nuisance code to help us address that. I think we are in pretty good shape right now with what we have. It is now, to be really honest, is a matter of staffing. It's a matter of actually, doing the enforcement rather than having the regulations in place to do that. So I think we're in good shape with that.
Can I add a little bit to that, Brad? Just because we had public health and safety yesterday and that came up, we got an update regarding code enforcement and Rutledge retired. So the replacement starts hopefully next week. And then they went through in 2022, there's 54 violations and they went through the percentage and everything. So the replacement is hopefully starting.
Good. No, thank you. That's good news. Ross was an excellent resource and we tried our best not to let him retire and he's got around that. So.
Leetta, just quickly on an average, what infractions were the most?
25% were other, and then they broke that down, but 19% was overgrown vegetation, 23% trash, 19% abandoned vehicles or, on the right of way or on city property, not their own, 9% living in their vehicle or a tent, and 5% graffiti.
5% what?
Graffiti.
Graffiti. Can you live in a vehicle in someone's driveway and have it all connected up and live in it if you're on someone's driveway or lawn?
Not long term, no. There is a limit to how long they can do that. The concern primarily is ongoing water and sewer connections. Running things over ground is not a good idea, especially in the winter. And for other reasons that they're really not built for, I want to say permanent habitation, they're built for short term.
I think we're going to see more of that. I've seen more of it as I've driven around as the housing situation gets worse. Your relatives have an RV, so they come and park on and stay, on their relatives' property. So that's just, I think, a sign of the times.
You're probably right. Well, we are at 2:55. We have about 5 minutes before the 3 o'clock hour here. Are there any other questions before we decide if this is appropriate to have on the consent calendar for city council?
I'm okay with it being on consent because if someone has something, they could just pull it, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, with the below the line, of course, you're always going to find something that I want above, but I'm not willing to take the other ones and move them down because
Right.
there's been so many delays and so many other things, right? So I'm comfortable with it as it's presented.
I have a question that is my question, and also two other people have asked this question. How, or is it appropriate for council to have input into, for example, I'm just going to use this example, the tree preservation and how we're going to change our rules and what we're going to require and all of that. Is it appropriate for a council member to either, write something down and give it to the tree board or the consultant or whatever as a suggestion of something to consider as a preservation tool or something?
My preference would be, and thank you for bringing that up, because we will be coming to probably general government in March to talk about the tree preservation ordinance and where we are in that, just before we start the formal discussions of the ordinance and so forth. I think at that time we will have had the opportunity to gather all the input that we've had from the community, and then sort of identify the large issues and how we're going to try to address those. And what I'd like to do at that time is sort of present to the GGC, here's where the direction we're going, and here are the issues we're going to be covering. Here are some suggested ways that we would like to address those as part of the ordinance. I think it probably might be a question for Karen about the input from council back down, but I would be happy to take any individual input from city council members and provide that to the planning commission and the tree board as part of their discussions, just as a way of making sure that everybody is having the same questions and all the things are being answered.
Okay. So if you bring that in March, this goes along with the question, Karen, if you bring that in March, I mean, we're council members here, so you're bringing it to us and you're telling us the things, and then can we make comments or
From my perspective, we want to make sure that the council understands what is being discussed and what are the big issues, what are the potential solutions that are being discussed before you see it at the very end. What we don't want in a larger process like this is to set up a situation where we spend a year and a half doing something and then we can show up at council saying, isn't this a great idea? And you've never heard of it before. So we're trying to give you some opportunities as we go through the process to say, here's where we are, here's kind of the direction we're moving, what do you think?
Okay.
And then have some level, a way of communicating back and forth about how that's occurring. We probably won't have an actual ordinance to present you. In fact, we won't, but we'll have a general, here are the structure of it, probably how it'll look like. Here are some of the big issues and here are some of the potential ways we're going to be looking at addressing those.
Wonderful. That's exactly what I wanted to know. That'll calm some folks' nerves
Yeah, and
too.
well, this is the tree preservation ordinance and the urban forest related regulations are sort of a dry run of the process we're going to be using for the comp plan update. Again, the idea is not to present the council with the final product and say, isn't it great? Because I know Leetta would support it, but Michael would shoot it down. But we want to make sure that we involve everybody as early as we can in the process.
Very good. I think that's wise. Yeah.
All right, well, with
That was
that
on my own.
reminder, is there a motion that we move this to, or approve this for the consent calendar for the January 17th city council meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second it this time.
Oh, okay. I'm
We can
sorry.
rotate around.
I was,
There's a motion by Councilmember Doff and a second by myself. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Are there any additional items that folks have or that you have, Brad? Brad went off camera, so I'm gonna take that to mean
No.
there are no additional.
He's done. Good
No.
day.
No, I'm happy to say I don't have anything else.
All right. Well, with that, I think we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. We kept it to exactly 1 hour. All right. Well, thank
Very
you,
good.
and see you all on at our next meeting, or on Tuesday, rather.
Yes. Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye.